This is Lenny Pfeffer from the Dorchester County Council. Even when I can't get to the MACO headquarters in Annapolis, I know I can keep in touch with policy issues by listening to the Conduit Street Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast. Kevin Kinnally here with Michael Sanderson, and we have a very special guest today, Arundel County Executive Steuart Pittman. Mr. County Executive, we are really glad to have you on with us today.
Well, I am excited about being on because I love listening to your podcast, and it's fun, always fun.
Well, we're flattered by that, and I know you're the type who's engaged in all this stuff. I will say that Kevin and I, in addition to being co-hosts of the podcast and being kind of policy nerds and part of the MACO policy team, we're both Anne Arundel County residents. And I'll tell you, when I saw your latest weekly letter, it really rang a bell. I felt like the issues that you raised there and facing in Anne Arundel County sort of connected a lot of dots that counties across the state are facing, the kind of stuff that we've been hearing about as MACO goes out and sits with the governing bodies of counties across the state. So we're really pleased to have you on to talk kind of about working with your school system, facing crowding challenges in the public schools, but also thinking about housing and all the public policies around that and trying to make a path forward across what are admittedly some tricky issues. So I think this is interesting stuff, and it's really timely to have you aboard. So thanks so much for doing that.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so first, before we get too deep, let's get back to this weekly letter. Mr. County Executive, tell us about that. Again, we subscribe. I think we both get it through our email. It's also available online, but pretty much anyone can sign up to receive this weekly update right from you. And they'll get to hear about what's going on, what's on your mind. And I think this is just part of the excellent comms that the county has going on. So talk a little bit about the weekly letter and why it's so important to get that message out.
Yeah, I mean, I like to write, and I got to admit, this is one of my favorite things to do each week is to write this thing. And the idea, we started them, I think, in January. It was kind of a second term thing. It's like, okay, I'm term limited. I can say whatever I want, right? So I like to go in a little bit more depth than you usually do in a press release or social media post, and pick a topic that I really feel strongly about. So I think this is number 22, about 22 weeks since the beginning of the year, and pick a topic and go in some depth. And I was really excited about where we are right now on school APF legislation that that we've introduced, that the council is going to have a hearing on Monday night. And just the way all the pieces are coming together and all the players are cooperating, we're kind of in a neat time in Anne Arundel County, I think, where it's not even clear on the county council where the divisions are. We've got 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans, but it doesn't always line up that way. There's 7 individuals who really work hard, and they work with each other. They don't always agree with each other. And we've got a good relationship with them in the administration. We also have a great relationship with the school board and the new superintendent. So there's some magic happening here.
That's a pretty good place to start as you work through issues that affect the schools and school facilities and so forth. So let's try and tee that up a little bit. I think we'd like to hear, and I think our listeners would like to hear how this comes together. Anne Arundel County is one of Maryland's larger jurisdictions. You're not the largest in the state. You're not like a giant outlier in any particular demographic respect. You've got like that partisan split on your county council and different districts and so forth. So it is kind of interesting that Anne Arundel is in some ways representative. There are parts of the county that are very metropolitan and feel downtowny. And then there are parts of the county that are very rural and very sprawling. So there's a little bit of everything in Anne Arundel County. I hear it's the best place for all. Do I have that right? So
you have that right. It's on all the signs as you enter the county. And I love the fact that we're a microcosm of the state and of the country. We have urban, rural, suburban, but we're also growing. And as are a lot of suburban communities, or counties, and growth has been a hot political issue. Figuring out how to move forward on development, where we want development, where we don't, what kinds of development we want. Housing has not historically been considered by most of the political establishment in the county a problem that needs to be confronted. The market's done what the market's done. I am now saying it is not just a problem, but it's a crisis. It's a growing crisis. The numbers are pretty clear. Of our renters in our county, 45% are cost burden, paying more than 30% of their income. 20% are paying more than half of their income on their rent. Rent has gone up quite rapidly, and homeownership costs. Price of housing has gone up about double the pace of income. And if you look at the income, middle of the spectrum, it's gone up even faster than that has. So we've got a lot of people saying that we need to do housing. We've got a strategy and a lot of parts to it to increase production of housing, particularly affordable housing, and get it in the right places. It's a smart growth agenda, transit-oriented redevelopment, and there's a lot of things that we're doing. But the folks who work on it have said, our biggest obstacle in Arundel County is more than half our county is closed to housing development because of school APF, because of capacity. And so we put a work group together way back in 2020, actually, to figure out how we got where we are and how we're going to get out of it, what the proposal should be. We thought about bringing legislation to the county before the election, and we knew it was going to blow up politically. So we waited, which I think was a good thing. And so we have a proposal that I'll tell you about, the legislative proposal, but it would only work if the school board was finally willing to redistrict. So we have 16,000 vacant seats in our school system, believe it or not. And that number's grown a lot in the last decade. But at the same time, we have we have one school, elementary school, that's at 106, that will be at 160% capacity this fall, they project. We've got, I think, almost 20 schools that are over capacity now, over 100%. And we have a school APF law that says you close the feeder, you close that area, whether if it's a high school, if you're projected to be at 100%, if it's middle school or elementary school, a previous council actually lowered the threshold to 95%. So if they project that we'll be at 95% capacity, everything shuts down. So you add all those feeder systems together, and it's the parts of our county where we want development, according to our 20-year plan, that are closed. And the parts where we want to maintain open space, natural areas, are the ones that do have capacity. So rather than letting the school utilization chart drive where development goes, we wanted to take that off the table and let our other laws and our general development plan drive where development goes.
Right.
The great news here is that the school board has finally recognized they have to redistrict, and that is underway.
Right. So there's a number of moving parts there, and I want to get to one of them, because this context, not every jurisdiction has some of these laws in place. And so for those who don't have things like, you've mentioned APF, this is an adequate public facilities law or ordinance. Anne Arundel is one of a number of jurisdictions, but it's not universal and they don't all look the same. But this is generally speaking regarded as a smart practice to say, you take a look at the infrastructure you have. Do you have enough seats for the kids in the public schools that are available? Do you have the water and sewer infrastructure? Sometimes it might be like the roadway capacity, but you look at measures to handle growth and you say, if we don't have the infrastructure there to support new people moving in, then we shouldn't be issuing building permits for an area. And an awful lot of people would say, just in isolation, that's smart policy. Don't grow in a place that can't handle the growth. And then you should be going and saying, we need to expand a school building, or we need to get some more capacity in our water system or whatnot in order to grow in an area where we'd like to target growth. That is everything you're saying there is like a core tenet of smart growth philosophy.
Yeah.
But you can see where this has led a county like Anne Arundel, that there are areas that are desirable for growth and make sense for growth. But if you've said, until we've got the facilities, in particular the schools, we can't grow there, you've got exactly the places where the county thinks growth makes sense, And if you're topped out in the schools, there's a red light in the spaces that make the most sense for growth, unless you do some reallocating, right?
Yeah. And the frustrating thing about it was that former school boards, previous school boards, certainly should have done some redistricting, because that's how you can solve this, is you change the boundaries. Now, that's always politically difficult to do.
Right.
But as that number of non-utilized vacant seats, they call them, grew, it became more and more clear that we were being fiscally irresponsible if we just kept building new schools while we had empty seats in other places. And there's not a mechanism for us to require the school board to redistrict. But we got to the point finally where we have a good board and a new superintendent, and that process is underway. In fact, they've divided the county in half. The northern half, which has more than half of the population, is going to be redistricted in time for not this coming fall, but fall of 24. We've got a couple of new schools opening at that time, and it makes sense. Then the rest of the county will be redistricted 2 years later. So that solves a lot of the problem. But the legislation that we're introducing to change our APF law is designed to prevent this problem from recurring in the future as well.
And I do want to get into that legislation, Mr. County Executive, but I want to go back just a bit, because these two issues, again, affordable housing and school overcrowding and redistricting, they really do go hand in hand. You have schools overcrowded, it's not all of them, and then you have problems with finding enough affordable and achievable housing options. So first, let's talk about affordable housing, because that's an issue everywhere. Everybody's feeling that. And your fiscal 2024 budget makes a big commitment on that front by creating a permanent funding source from high dollar real estate transfers for a new affordable housing trust fund. It's a creative approach. And can you talk about that a little bit, where that came from and the idea behind it?
Yeah. So we knew that we needed to have some local investment, more local investment beyond just our federal money, our homes, CDBG, some of those things, to help these projects get through that we're trying to do, low-income housing tax credits, building more affordable homeownership, but really primarily rental and multifamily, and trying to target, as low as around 60% of area median income. And those are often low-income housing tax credit projects. Right now, a lot of them are stuck because of interest rates have gone up and the numbers aren't working. So the Housing Trust Fund is a way to help those across the finish line. Some of it goes straight to homebuyer assistance as well. Some of it goes straight to rental assistance. Some of it goes to eviction prevention, transitional housing. So it's a very flexible pot of money. We created it with $10 million with ARPA money in the beginning. But we knew that we needed a recurring funding source for it to work. And so it is this real estate transfer tax on the properties above $1 million. Our transfer tax is at 1% for all properties now. We had to get state authority to be able to have a staggered percentage number to be able to charge a higher rate for it is properties that sell for over $1 million. And that is what is just going into effect. We figure we'll get about $7 million the first year, but when the market, when sales start happening at the pace that they were, and it's starting to come back, that'll put us at about $10 million a year. So that, along with some other things that we've done, we did a workforce housing density bonus that is proving to be somewhat useful. We did a fair housing bill. We've done an accessory dwelling unit bill. These are all little things that working around the edges. We're going to do a redevelopment bill that provides some actual incentives if it's an area that is being redeveloped for that housing, and really looking for obstacles to building this housing. And then, of course, one of these obstacles, and maybe the biggest one, was our school APF laws and our failure to redistrict.
Right. So this is sort of transformative thinking in a lot of ways, as you mentioned. For an awful long time, I think people at the state and local level mostly felt like housing policy was, 80 or 90%, the market is going to do what the market is going to do. And there will be grants mostly coming from the federal level. You made mention of community development block grants, which are flexible funds that are useful for housing and a variety of other things at the community level. But I don't think anyone really 20 years ago was thinking of, we need to have 6 different arrows in the quiver to try and nudge this edge and push that side of what the private sector provision of housing is going to look like. But if we create an incentive, some more density over here, and we loosen up some zoning requirements over there, and we make an easier path for accessory dwelling units in the areas where they make sense, and we make a reframing of adequate public facilities laws so that, sure, we're not going to go crazy, but we can find a way to soften those in places that make sense. Like doing all those pieces, it seems like you end up with, a bunch of arrows that can be somewhere around the target of moving things in a more helpful direction for your residents who need it. I mean, you drop those numbers of how many renters in the county are distressed by what share of their income they have to pay toward rent. I think you're right to see this as a situation where a lot of folks need help of one form or another, and some of it's money, some of it's more flexible policy. This is a really interesting, multifaceted approach as I see it.
And it's not just the people who are struggling with the cost of housing don't tend to be the people who are showing up at council meetings and getting real involved in campaigns to change things. Our business community is pretty active, though, and our business community is now saying we got to deal with this housing crisis because we can't hire because there's nowhere for our workforce to live. So that's been helpful. And in fact, it was our Chamber of Commerce that said years ago we needed to have a moderately priced dwelling unit set aside for new development, get a certain percentage of workforce housing. That's also on our agenda that we hope to get done before the end of the year. So we have a good coalition of interests aligned to do this. But it's true that it's not an issue till somebody makes it an issue. The other thing I would just say is that it's happened the right way. We did our 20-year plan, our plan 2040, and got a lot of community engagement in that, and came out with a plan, smart growth, land use agenda, with some real focus on affordable, make greener, more equitable, and sustainable land use plan. And so it does shine the light, and it says we need to do these things. So we can always go back to the plan and say we're doing this because it fits in with all the other pieces. So it's easier to explain to people, and people understand it. It's one of the hardest things to confront. I mean, look at the West Coast. They've been working on this stuff for years, and they're still got more increased numbers of homeless people, and people can't afford the housing costs continue to go up. So we can't do it alone at the county level for sure, but we do our part. Then I think it's going to become a bigger issue at the state level. It's certainly been an issue at the federal level, and we got to just keep trying to make progress.
Yeah, I mean, I would add, just for our listeners' benefit, that you made mention of Arundel undertaking a 20-year vision on what growth should look like and how to manage it and what to prioritize, thinking toward the year 2040. That's not a state mandate. The state government requires local governments that have zoning authority to do a comprehensive plan, and you put together that comp plan with public input on a 10-year cycle, and you're supposed to be looking ahead, and you have to include some different elements and so forth. So there are a number of things that we have to do, but this was a decision that you and the leadership in Anne Arundel County decided this is the right way to respond to our residents and the needs in our community. We need to be looking ahead further than just the usual, what's the remaining 6 years of our 10-year cycle look like? Let's look at the year 2040, because that's the vision that, that's what the voters wanted in bringing you in, right?
Yeah. 10 years goes by in no time. And we know how long it takes to do any development, and we know how long it takes to build a park, to build public infrastructure, to build housing, to build town centers. So yeah, it's got to be a longer term.
Right. And so, this is certainly a multifaceted approach when you're trying to tackle something like affordable housing. So I think you mentioned this briefly earlier, but you also have a work group tasked with drafting legislation to require a percentage of new units and subdivisions to be affordable housing for essential workers. That also has to be a piece of this puzzle. And I think that's what you went back and talked about the business community and, them coming forward and saying, hey, we need help here. This is a problem. And that is also going to be essential, right? Is this idea that if you're going to build something new in a new subdivision, you should automatically have to include a certain number of affordable units. And that's something that the county is looking at as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the larger counties in Central Maryland have this MPDU, moderately priced dwelling unit, and I wish we had done it in the first term, because we've got some right in Reaver Road, been some very controversial, somewhat controversial developments. One's got 500 units of apartments. It's all going to be market rate, and of course advertised like they often do as luxury. And had we done that bill, couple of years back, 10% at least of that, 500 would be 50 units of really affordable in a nice setting. So it's integrated. We were in Howard County for the Mako meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and we toured a beautiful new apartment building that was like that. And they literally had people that were moving in that were going to be getting housing vouchers in this beautiful place with a swimming pool, and really integrating the housing, and the developer was there and thrilled about it. So,
yeah, and that's certainly, again, another approach that I think is part of this puzzle. So going back to school redistricting, and you talked about legislation, so I want to get into that a little bit more. Firmly establishes the 100% threshold. It requires that the Board of Education share its methodology for projecting school capacity. It implements the adjacency policy, and it adds housing that meets an affordability threshold to an existing list of exemptions. So a lot of stuff there. Break that down a little bit in terms of, what do you think the most important pieces of this are, and how do you think it all meshes together to work really well?
Yeah, so the goal is to have no overcrowded schools, to not be building schools we don't need, because we have vacancies, and to allow to not allow the school capacity chart to drive where housing is built, so that we use other factors. So I don't think it would work, this legislation, if we didn't have the school board doing redistricting now. And what they've done is, for this big chunk of the county, the northern half that has got more than half the population, they put out earlier in the spring, they put out 2 scenarios of how the boundaries would be done, who would go to school where, and both of them had fixed the problem for now, where no school would be overcrowded. So that one that's at 160 gets down below 100. So that we could just leave it alone and let them do that. But we found something that Baltimore County does that we really liked. Well, we had a couple of options. Let me back up. Options. We could have done what I think I counted about 8 counties in Maryland, and most of the central Maryland counties allow a school to go above 100% in utilization. They range from 105 to 115% before they shut things down, before they shut down development in that community. We looked at that, and there were some people who thought that was the way to go. My concern was that's saying it's okay to have overcrowded schools. It's not. We shouldn't have a policy, I think, that says it's okay, as long as we have a way of not shutting things down that quickly. The way to not shut things down that quickly is to adjust boundaries as things get overcrowded. And so what we did was we say, we won't close that feeder system if there's an adjacent system that has capacity. In other words, there's nothing stopping the school board from making a minor adjustment in the boundaries between those two to create the capacity for in the one that's full. Right. So that's what we're doing. That's what this bill proposes, is that if there's an adjacent feeder system that has capacity, you can't close down the one that's at capacity. That sort of throws the ball into the school board's court, and then they have to make a decision. But there's a lot of pressure then on them to redistrict, to adjust a line to make it all work.
Right, and these aren't trivial things to undertake. I mean, realigning school, boundaries and so forth within school systems and so forth. We know what tends to happen there is, get folks with their, alma mater jacket and so forth. And it's like, well, all the folks here are used to affiliating with the Tigers, and now we're supposed to be with the Lions. And hold on, that doesn't sound right at all. That absolutely happens. But I mean, this probably is the kind of practicality that these crises call for. That there's nothing wrong with saying grow where you've got the infrastructure, but if that takes a little bit of lateral thinking to get from A to B, then maybe that's what it takes so you don't shut down affordable housing opportunities in a community where the workers at those schools can't stay nearby and live nearby and have their kids in those schools. I mean, some of those stories I think are awfully compelling as well. So maybe that's what it takes to bridge this gap.
And the other thing I should mention about when they close things, the courts, I'm told, will not accept you permanently closing things. You can close it. You can say no development for 6 years. So that development, if you have a developer that's willing to wait for a really long time, they get put on a list and they wait for 6 years, and then they can go in. There's a scenario where you could have a very large development with hundreds and hundreds of units, or even thousands, that waits the 6 years. And if the school board won't redistrict, they have to overcrowd the school, or we have to build a new school. So we can be almost forced to build a new school, knowing that there's going to be a lot of new students coming in, and that's fiscally wrong. That we should have to build a new school because a political body is afraid to do the right thing and adjust the boundary when the next door there's plenty of capacity. So it does come down to that fiscal responsibility to do the hard thing rather than build a new school, because we're forced to build the schools.
Right.
Right. Well, I mean, what I'll say, we know that in Annapolis and in state houses across the country, we're seeing frustration about the housing market. And it's easy to say, oh, it's the dumb zoning laws that are keeping an abundance of housing from springing up. It's the dumb local governments, and it's these outdated policies. And listening to all these moving parts in Anne Arundel County, it seems more complicated than that. And I also think it's a really good opportunity to highlight, the right way to do this, and that, counties are thinking outside the box, and counties are trying to solve this problem, this crisis. And the approach here, bringing everyone to the table, getting everyone to buy in. That's the way you solve a big problem, right? You have to get everybody to the table. It seems like that's what's going on here. Multiple moving pieces, but at the end of the day, that's what it's going to take. And so I think the approach Anne Arundel is using, and this is over, multi-year approach now, and all these pieces coming together, that's what it's going to take. And it's going to take thinking outside the box, and it's going to take time. But ultimately, we really wanted to pick your brain because, seeing what's going on and seeing all these moving pieces fall into place, we're pretty confident and excited about the outcomes here. And I think it could be a model for other counties in Maryland, and not just in Maryland, but across the board.
Hope so. Yeah. There's no easy answers, as you say, and it takes everybody working together.
Any closing thoughts from you, Mr. County Executive, on affordable housing or school capacity issues before we let you go? I think we hit most of the main points, but certainly want to make sure that you have the ability to add anything before we sign off.
The only thing that we didn't talk a lot about is you did mention zoning, and I know that one of the things that MACO does is protect the rights of local jurisdictions to make their own decisions and have and zoning is one area where that's done. And there's been talk about state making requirements on zoning for local jurisdictions. We did that on workforce housing. We created this density bonus, and there was opposition to it. In fact, it was done in the county. It was taken away because of one project, and opposition to that from people who said, not in my backyard, will you put this affordable housing? So when I came back in, we passed the bill to allow in R5, 5 units per acre, to go up higher to R15. And there were people who said it was going to be the end of the world. You're changing the nature of a community, and there are going to be these apartment buildings all over the place on the corner of a single family community. And we knew that wasn't going to happen, but we wanted to just open the door a little bit to some situations where it would work. And here 3 years later, we're very excited. We've got one 120 unit development that probably the numbers wouldn't have worked if we hadn't have done that. So you're right that when people just point their finger at the zoning, you can fix all the zoning in the world. But if you don't go to the developers of affordable housing and ask them what the real obstacles are, and they tell you it's school APF, or they tell you they need a little bit of money for something, or whatever it is, or streamline a process, then you miss the boat and you don't actually produce the housing. So we've got to look at the goal, which is actually producing the housing, and listen to the people who build it, as we develop the policy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will be watching this approach, and sometimes That's what we need, the whole laboratories of democracy thing, right? Michael, any closing thoughts from you before we sign off?
No, I think this is just what I wanted. I felt like a conversation like this, connecting these multiple pieces together, is just a healthy thing for a policy concern that sounds too simple for some folks. And they're like, we just need to change zoning and everything's cool. I think the answer is more like, you got to approach this multiple ways with private sector and the public sector. And maybe you work with your schools, and maybe it's going to take your municipal governments and their water system, or like it may be place by place a little bit different. But I think this approach, like, it takes not just the village, but like all the villages and the county and all of the associated together. I think this is, generally speaking, the right way. And I hope some of our state partners are thinking this way as well.
All right. Well, Mr. County Executive, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we really appreciate it. And again, we'll be watching and we'll be monitoring the developments here, and we'll make sure to update our listeners on what happens moving forward. But again, we're pretty confident and excited about this, and I know you are too.
All right. Well, this is fun. It's fun talking to people who really get it. And we'll continue this conversation for years, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there for today. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe. That way, all of these episodes will be sent directly to the device of your choice. You can also follow along on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and then, of course, you should be reading the Conduit Street blog. But for Anne Arundel County Executive Steuart Pittman and Michael Sanderson, this is Kevin Kinnally signing off, and we will talk to you soon.